Ladies and gentlemen, it is always an honor to stand before you and share the eternal wisdom of God. Today I want to talk about a God who is full of surprises. A God who doesn't operate within the limits of our understanding, but moves in ways that leave us in awe. I want to help you identify the signs that God is about to surprise you. And when He's taken from us, we know that He won't return again. And many other things after that. God often interrupts the ordinary to birth the extraordinary. When your routine is shaken, it may be the prelude to a divine surprise. You might be wondering why the things that once felt stable and predictable have suddenly shifted. Perhaps your plans, carefully laid out, are no longer unfolding as you imagined. This disruption, though uncomfortable, is a sign that God is positioning you for something greater. So may this blessing be the same, that God is positioning you for something greater. Consider the life of Joseph in the Bible. His peaceful life was abruptly disrupted when his brothers sold him into slavery. What seemed like the end of his dreams was actually the beginning of a journey that would position him to save nations. In the same way, God's disruptions are not meant to harm you. They are designed to align you with your destiny. When God is about to move in your life, opposition often increases. It may feel like the forces working against you are stronger than ever before. You may face criticism, obstacles, or delays that seem relentless. But understand this: the enemy fights hardest when he knows you are on the brink of a breakthrough. If you are experiencing unusual resistance, it is a clear indicator that God is up to something extraordinary. Think about the story of the Israelites at the Red Sea. They faced the impossible, an uncrossable sea before them, and an approaching enemy behind them. Yet, in the midst of this opposition, God performed a miraculous surprise, parting the sea and making a way where there was none. Sometimes God's surprises require us to wait. You may have been praying for a long time, believing for a specific promise, yet nothing seems to be happening. The silence can be frustrating and the delay may tempt you to doubt. But remember, God's delays are not His denials. His timing is not ours, but it is always perfect. The longer the wait, the greater the testimony. Just as a farmer waits for the right season to harvest his crops, so does God wait for the perfect moment to release His blessings. In your waiting, He is building your faith, refining your character, and preparing you to receive what He has in store. When God is about to surprise you, His favor often finds you in the most unlikely places. You may be looking for solutions or blessings in familiar areas, but God's ways are higher than ours. He works through unexpected people, circumstances, and opportunities. Be open and discerning, because what you are seeking may not come in the way you imagined. Think about Ruth, a Moabite widow, who found herself gleaning in a field owned by Boaz. She could not have foreseen that this field would be the setting for a divine connection that would change her life forever. God's favor is not limited to what we expect. It operates in the realm of the unexpected. There is something remarkable about God's ability to declare the end from the beginning. What may appear to be the end of the road is often the beginning of a new chapter. When one door closes, it is because God is preparing to open a better one. Consider Elijah when he stood on Mount Carmel. After a miraculous display of God's power, he faced fierce opposition from Queen Jezebel and fled in despair, believing his ministry was over. But God met him in that low moment, not to end his story, but to redirect it. Elijah's perceived ending became the platform for a new season of purpose and legacy. Finally, when God is about to surprise you, He often stirs something deep within your spirit. You may feel a holy restlessness, a sense that something greater is on the horizon. This stirring is not a coincidence. It is a signal that God is moving. It ignites new desires, awakens dormant dreams, and draws you closer to Him. This internal shift is a divine invitation to prepare yourself for what's coming. Think of Peter, who experienced a stirring in his spirit when Jesus called him to step out of the boat and walk on water. The stirring led him into the unknown, but it also led him into a miraculous encounter with God. God is always at work, orchestrating things in ways we cannot see. His surprises are always worth the wait, and they are always for our good. When you see these signs, don't resist them. Embrace them. God is not done with you, and His plans for you are far greater than anything you could imagine. Unusual opposition is often a clear indication that something significant is about to happen in your life. Opposition is not always a sign that you are on the wrong path. More often, it is evidence that you are on the right one. When God is preparing to release something extraordinary in your life, the enemy intensifies his efforts to discourage and distract you. This is because the enemy recognizes the potential of what God is about to do, even before you fully understand it yourself. Consider the story of David before he became king. As a young shepherd, David faced opposition from Goliath, a giant who towered over him in size and strength. This was no ordinary challenge. It was a test of faith and courage. The opposition wasn't there to destroy David, but to prepare him for the throne. In facing Goliath, David demonstrated the qualities of a leader: boldness, reliance on God, and unwavering trust in His power. The giant wasn't an obstacle. He was a stepping stone. The same is true in your life. The greater the opposition, the closer you are to your breakthrough. Opposition has a way of refining you, sharpening your focus, and deepening your dependence on God. When things seem to get more difficult, it is often because you are nearing a divine opportunity. The resistance is a sign that you are advancing, and the enemy is trying to prevent you from stepping into what God has prepared for you. Think about the children of Israel as they stood on the brink of the promised land. They faced fierce opposition from the inhabitants of the land, who were described as giants. Fear spread among the people, and many doubted they could possess what God had promised. Yet, the opposition was not a sign of God's absence, but of His nearness. It was a test to see if they would trust Him to fight on their behalf. For those who believed, the opposition became the catalyst for victory. In your own life, opposition might take the form of criticism, setbacks, or challenges that seem insurmountable. It may feel like the world is working against you, but remember, God is for you. He uses opposition to strengthen you and prepare you for the opportunities ahead. Opposition is often the training ground where your faith is fortified and your character is shaped. The enemy knows that if you persevere, you will step into the fullness of what God has promised. That is why he fights so hard to make you quit. He tries to magnify the obstacles, to make them seem larger than the promises of God. But do not be deceived. Your God is greater than any opposition you face. The battle is not yours. It belongs to the Lord. Take courage in knowing that opposition is not the end of the story. It is a sign that you are in the process of moving from preparation to promotion. The enemy only attacks what he fears, and if you are facing significant resistance, it is because there is something significant on the other side. Trust God through the process, because He is using the opposition to bring you into your divine opportunity. When it feels like God is silent, it's easy to interpret the delay as a denial. You've prayed, you've fasted, you've believed, yet nothing seems to be changing. The temptation is to think that God has forgotten you or that He isn't listening. But let me assure you, God's delays are not His denials. His silence does not mean He isn't working. Behind the scenes, God is orchestrating circumstances, aligning people, and preparing you for the fulfillment of His promise. Delay often serves a purpose that we may not immediately understand. Sometimes the delay is about preparation. God isn't just preparing the blessing for you, He's preparing you for the blessing. There are lessons to be learned, faith to be strengthened, and character to be refined in the waiting season. Think about Moses, who spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading the Israelites out of Egypt. Famine came on the land, where there was not slaughter in the desert. Those years were not wasted. They were a time of preparation, molding him into the leader God needed him to be. In our culture of instant gratification, waiting can feel unbearable. But God operates on His own timetable, not ours. His timing is always perfect, even if it doesn't align with our expectations. The story of Abraham and Sarah is a powerful reminder of this truth. They waited decades for the fulfillment of God's promise to give them a son. Along the way, they faced doubt, frustration, and even moments of trying to take matters into their own hands. They doubted, tried to scare us, and made us demands. But when the time was right, God fulfilled his promise, and Isaac was born. The delay was not a denial. It was part of God's perfect plan. This is the levitation principle. Waiting on God requires faith and trust. It's about believing that even when you can't see what he's doing, he's still at work. It's about holding on to his promises, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. Consider the words of Isaiah 14:31. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Waiting is not passive. It's an active posture of trust and expectation. Sometimes the delay is about timing. God's plans are intricately connected to his perfect timing. If he gave you what you were asking for too soon, it might not be a blessing. It might overwhelm or even harm you. Imagine asking God for rain when the ground isn't ready to receive it. The rain would cause flooding instead of growth. God's timing ensures that when the blessing comes, it will bear fruit in your life. Joseph's story illustrates this beautifully. After being sold into slavery by his brothers, Joseph spent years in Potiphar's house and in prison. It must have seemed to him like God's promise of greatness was nothing but a distant dream. But those years of waiting were not wasted. They were years of preparation. When the time was right, God elevated Joseph to a position of power, making him second in command over all of Egypt. The delay was not a denial, it was a setup for a divine surprise, your life. The delay may feel frustrating, but it is not purposeless. It is in the waiting that God strengthens your faith, teaches you patience, and deepens your relationship with him. Delay is often a sign that what is coming is far greater than what you expected. The wait enlarges your capacity to receive, because God doesn't just want to meet your needs, he wants to exceed them. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting, do not lose heart. Trust that God is working even when you can't see it. Remember that his ways are higher than your ways, and his thoughts are higher than your thoughts. What feels like a delay is simply God ensuring that everything aligns perfectly for your good and his glory. Keep believing, keep praying, and keep trusting, because at the appointed time his answer will come, and it will be worth the wait. And I have to say, uncommon favor often shows up in the most unexpected places, through the most unlikely people, and in situations that we could never have predicted. When God is about to surprise you, he doesn't always follow the path you've planned or the avenues you've mapped out. His favor is not confined to your limited understanding of what's possible. Instead, it often comes when you least expect it, through people and opportunities that seem out of place or even impossible. Take the story of Esther, for example. A young Jewish orphan, taken from her homeland, suddenly finds herself in the Persian king's palace. She had no connections, no status, and no guarantee that she would be chosen. Yet it was in this unlikely place that she received God's favor. It was in this unexpected setting that God placed her in a position to save her people. Esther's story is a powerful reminder that God can elevate you from the most unlikely circumstances and place you in positions of influence and favor, even when you think it's not possible. Her marriage to her husband was difficult. She wrote in her journal, "In your life, God's favor may come in forms that you don't recognize at first. It could be a job offer from a company you never considered, a relationship with someone who doesn't fit your type, or an opportunity that seems outside of your skill set. But these unexpected avenues are often the very means through which God is working in your life. It's important to be open and discerning, to recognize when God is moving, even if it doesn't look like what you imagined. Even if it doesn't look like what you imagined. Look at the story of the Samaritan woman at the well in John 4. She was an outcast, someone considered undesirable by the Jewish people, yet Jesus deliberately chose to speak with her. In that moment, he offered her not just physical water, but the living water of eternal life. Through her, many Samaritans came to believe in Jesus. This interaction, which began with a woman who was rejected by society, became the gateway for a significant spiritual move. At the end of the book, God's favor found her in an unlikely place. God often uses people who don't fit your expectations to bring His favor into your life. It might be someone you would never have considered, or someone with whom you have no natural connection. Think about Ruth, a Moabite widow who found favor with Boaz, a wealthy landowner. Ruth wasn't part of Boaz's people, and by all human standards she had little to offer. Yet God's favor opened the door for her, not only to meet Boaz, but to eventually become part of the lineage of King David and ultimately of Jesus Christ. God's favor doesn't depend on your background, but on His purpose for your life. Sometimes the places where we expect to find favor are the very places God avoids in order to reveal something deeper. We often seek validation from those who are similar to us, those we know or those in power. But God's favor is not limited to familiar circles. The Lord can open doors in the most surprising places, through the most surprising people, if we are willing to follow His lead. God's favor also comes through opportunities that seem too good to be true, but if you are open, you will see that they are tailor-made for your purpose. When Joseph was in prison, he was forgotten by everyone around him. Yet when the king had a troubling dream, Joseph's gift of interpretation brought him before the ruler of Egypt. In that moment, the favor of God catapulted him from prison to the palace, from being a prisoner to being second in command over all of Egypt. On release, that promotion came through an unexpected opportunity, a dream, a moment of divine timing, and a seemingly insignificant encounter. Very often the answer is the unknown. To receive the surprises of God, you must stay open to the possibility that His favor will come through avenues you might never have considered. It may not come wrapped in the way you expect or from people you've known for years. Be willing to receive God's favor from unexpected sources, and you will find that His blessings flow in ways you never imagined. When you align yourself with God's will and stay open to His leading, He will surprise you by opening doors you thought were closed, bringing people into your life who will elevate you, and presenting opportunities that far exceed what you thought was possible. And in this context, the events around me eventually opened up a door. God's favor is not just about receiving blessings, but about understanding the depth of His love and grace. When He chooses to bless you in uncommon ways, it's not just for your benefit, it's for the fulfillment of His purpose through you. Stay open, stay alert, and stay ready, because the unexpected opportunities that come through unusual people and places are often the very channels through which God will bring His greatest surprises into your life. When we look at our circumstances through the lens of our own understanding, it's easy to believe that what we see is the final outcome. When things fall apart, when doors close, or when our plans don't seem to be unfolding the way we expected, it's natural to assume that it's the end of the road. But God, in His infinite wisdom, declares the end from the beginning. What might appear to be a dead end is actually the starting point for a divine promise being unfolded in your life. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 46:10, I declare the end from the beginning, and from ancient times, things that are not yet done. This verse reminds us that God's perspective is not bound by time or circumstances. While we may see a setback, God sees a setup for something greater. He sees the future with clarity, and He knows that what looks like a failure to us may be the very thing that sets us up for His greatest victory. Take the story of Jesus' crucifixion, for example. The disciples believed they were witnessing the end of everything they had hoped for. The Savior, the one they believed would deliver them from Roman oppression, was hanging on a cross, dying. It seemed like the end. But in reality, it was just the beginning. Jesus' death, though heartbreaking and tragic in the moment, was the very means by which the promise of salvation for all mankind would be fulfilled. So, what looked like a defeat was the ultimate victory. What seemed like the end of the road was the commencement of a new and eternal path of grace, hope, and redemption. In your own life, the closed doors, the setbacks, and the disappointments may appear to be the end of the road. Perhaps a relationship has ended, a dream has been deferred, or a season of success has come to a close. In those moments, it's easy to feel like God has forgotten you or that His promises will never come to pass. But I encourage you today to trust that what looks like an ending in your eyes is often just a beginning in God's perfect plan. And it is. Joseph's life is another powerful example of this truth. After being sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison, Joseph could have easily believed that his dreams were finished. It seemed like the road was closed, that his future was bleak. Yet what Joseph didn't see was that God was setting him up for promotion. The path through the pit and the prison led him straight to the palace, where he would become second in command of Egypt and save many lives, including those of his own family. What appeared to be a detour or even a dead end was actually God's perfect route to fulfill the dreams He had planted in Joseph's heart years before. There are times when our lives feel like we're walking through a dark tunnel, with no light at the end in sight. But in those moments, remember that God knows the end from the beginning. Just because you can't see the way forward doesn't mean God isn't already working behind the scenes. Every step, every trial, every challenge is leading you toward His divine plan. The road you are walking on may not be the one you envisioned, but it is the one God has ordained for you. Consider the Israelites in the wilderness. They left Egypt with the promise of a land flowing with milk and honey, yet their journey seemed to lead them through harsh deserts and against formidable enemies. It seemed like an endless struggle. But God was taking them through a process of purification, teaching them to rely on Him. Every detour, every moment of hardship was preparing them for the fulfillment of the promise. What seemed like a long, arduous journey was actually God's way of setting them up for a divine inheritance. One thing. God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with ours. When you're facing difficulty, don't mistake it for defeat. When doors close, don't think that your destiny has been diverted. God's plan is still in motion, and what appears to be a setback is often a divine setup for the next phase of your journey. God is the author of your story, and He sees the end from the beginning. He knows exactly where He is taking you, and He is faithful to lead you every step of the way. The story isn't over until God says it's over, and even then, it's just the beginning of something greater. Hold on to the truth that your story is unfolding according to His perfect will, and the challenges you face today are simply the foundation for the promises He is bringing to life tomorrow. When God is about to do something significant in your life, He often begins by stirring your spirit. This stirring is not a coincidence, but a divine signal that He is moving in ways you cannot yet see. It's an inner awakening, a deep, almost unexplainable feeling that something is shifting in your life. It may manifest as a renewed desire, a fresh dream, or an intensified hunger for God's presence. You prepare yourself for the transformation, without which this transformation would not be possible. These stirrings are not random emotions. They are the whispers of God preparing your heart for what is to come. The Holy Spirit has a way of stirring us from within, igniting passions and desires that align with God's perfect will. These stirrings often come when we least expect them, and they tend to disrupt the ordinary. They compel us to seek more of God, to step out in faith, and to pursue dreams and goals that we had long forgotten or never considered. When God is about to move in a new way, He first moves within us. Consider the life of Nehemiah. As a cupbearer to the king, Nehemiah lived a comfortable life. But when he heard of the desolation of Jerusalem, something stirred within him. He couldn't shake the burden. This stirring ignited a deep desire to rebuild the city, and it eventually led him to take action, standing before the king with a request that seemed impossible. But because God had stirred his spirit, Nehemiah found favor, and the walls of Jerusalem were rebuilt. What began as a small stirring in his heart led to a great divine movement. Similarly, when God is preparing you for something extraordinary, you may feel a restlessness in your spirit. It could be a sudden passion for a cause, a deep desire to serve, or an unshakable longing to grow closer to Him. This stirring is often accompanied by a sense of urgency, as if time is of the essence and you must move quickly. While the timing may be unknown, this stirring is God's way of urging you to be alert, to be ready, and to take the steps necessary to align with His will. This divine stirring often involves new dreams. The dreams that once seemed distant or even impossible may suddenly feel within reach. God plants new visions in your heart, showing you a glimpse of the future He is preparing for you. These dreams often come at pivotal moments in your life, when you are at a crossroads, or when you've experienced personal transformation. God's stirring helps refocus your attention on the greater purpose He has for you. This is a season where your perspective shifts, and you begin to see things through the lens of faith, not limitation. Gratitude becomes a muscle with your own mental fitness. Your gratitude becomes a muscle. In the Bible, God stirred the heart of Moses, a man who had fled Egypt, to return and deliver the Israelites from bondage. At the age of 80, Moses could have believed that his time had passed, but God's stirring within him reignited his purpose. The stirring wasn't just a fleeting feeling. It was the beginning of God's divine plan being unfolded in Moses' life. What seemed like the end of his story was actually the beginning of the greatest mission of his life. God also stirs our spirits when He wants to deepen our hunger for His presence. Sometimes we become complacent in our walk with God, but when He is about to do something powerful, He rekindles the desire for intimacy with Him. This renewed hunger causes us to seek God with greater fervor, to spend more time in prayer, worship, and His Word. We begin to crave His presence more than anything else, because we sense that something significant is coming. It's as if we intuitively know that our hearts must be prepared to receive what God has for us. This divine stirring can also prompt us to take bold steps of faith. It is not just an emotional experience, it compels us to act. Just as God stirred the heart of Esther to approach the king and save her people, He will stir you to take actions that may seem daunting or risky, but are crucial for the fulfillment of His plan. The stirring within you will give you the courage to take those steps, knowing that you are being led by the Holy Spirit. When God stirs your spirit, it is a sign that He is moving, even when you cannot yet see it. These stirrings are divine invitations to engage more deeply with His purposes for your life. They signal that God is about to do something significant, something beyond what you have known. In those moments, don't resist the stirring, embrace it. Lean into the new desires, the fresh dreams, and the deepened hunger for His presence. They are the markers of God's movement in your life, preparing you for the divine surprises that are just ahead. Trust the stirring. Trust that God is setting the stage for something extraordinary. Even if you can't fully understand what is happening, remember that the Holy Spirit is leading you into a season of transformation, growth, and divine opportunity. Your spirit is awakening to what God is about to do, and as you respond in faith, you will see His hand at work in ways you never imagined. As we reflect on these divine truths, let us remember that God is always at work, even when we cannot see the full picture. He is a master architect, meticulously designing your destiny, orchestrating every detail, every delay, every opposition, and every stirring in your spirit to fulfill His perfect plan for your life. When God is about to surprise you, it often begins with an unexpected shift, a divine disruption, or an uncommon favor. What seems like an obstacle is often a stepping stone, and what looks like a delay is simply God's way of positioning you for His greatness. Grace. You are not defined by your current circumstances, nor are you limited by the opposition you face. Your destiny is already declared in the heavens, and the promise of God over your life cannot be thwarted by any challenge, no matter how impossible it may seem. When God is about to do something extraordinary in your life, He doesn't consult your history. He prepares you for a future that exceeds all expectations. No matter what comes your way, you will recognize the need to accept any challenge, no matter how desperate and scary it might be. Know this: what may appear to be the end is often just the beginning of a divine movement, a new chapter where God will reveal His power, His purpose, and His favor in ways that will leave you astonished. Be open to the stirrings in your spirit, for they are the signs of divine movement. Be ready to embrace what God is about to do, because He is preparing to surprise you in ways that will transform not only your life, but the lives of those around you. As you walk in faith, trust in the process, for God has a divine plan, and He is not finished with you yet. Your best days are not behind you, they are ahead of you. The road you walk may not always be easy, but remember that every step, every challenge, and every moment of waiting is leading you to a place of divine fulfillment. Get ready, because God is about to surprise you, and when He does, it will be far beyond anything you could have ever imagined. Your future is bright and His promises are sure. Trust Him, for He has already declared the end from the beginning.